Mark Thibodeau joins us. You've heard him for years and years and years here on the Big 89, broadcast meteorologist for the Weather Channel. Mark, let's get right to it. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're very busy. I guess I'll start by asking how bad, how long, and how dangerous?
Well, pretty dangerous. Not very long. That's the good news. A short-lived, intense little heat wave here for the rest of today and tomorrow, and then we get some relief at the end of the week. It will not be like the heat wave we had back in the early to mid-90s, 1995. I believe was a year when we had a very long stretch of heat, and we had a lot of unfortunate circumstances come up with that. We've learned a lot from that, and certainly years later, we know how to handle these heat waves. We do well here in Chicago with emergency management and everything, and we are looking at near record highs coming up today and tomorrow. The record high for today is 97. We're going to be close to that, and that's not the real problem. The real problem is when you throw in the humidity, it's going to feel like it's 115 in some spots by late in the afternoon, and we really get concerned about how people handle the heat, not only outdoors, but indoors. A lot of our neighborhoods around Chicago that have a little age on them, some of them do not have good air conditioning or no air conditioning in some cases. And that's my biggest concern is it's really hot during the afternoon, so we know that. But at night, it doesn't cool down enough either. It barely gets below 80. So when it comes to where you're going to sleep at night, that can be a problem as well. You want to have maybe a lower room to sleep in where it's a little more ventilated. Upstairs, a lot of people do, especially people that live a little bit closer to the vest, is they keep their windows closed and there's no circulating air. With no air conditioning, that gets pretty dangerous at night. So if you have a fan or something, if you don't have air conditioning, keep the air circulating. That's the key. And as well, stay hydrated. Drink water and drink lots of water. That's the best way to do that. And check on friends and neighbors, of course, in this kind of a situation. If it's just too hot to stay where you are, you're saying, forget about it, I got to go somewhere, there are cooling centers. 311 tells you where the cooling centers are around the city of Chicago to get cool, especially when you are trying to sleep at night and get some rest. And during the day, obviously, outdoors, the obvious things go on. You want to stay hydrated, take minimal breaks, or take a lot of breaks in the AC or the shade if you're going to be outdoors. Try to get any outside work done as early in the morning as possible, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to minimize the stress on emergency management with the heat, given all the other things they deal with in the city of Chicago on a daily basis. So that's kind of what we're looking at. If we can get through a couple of days here, we're going to be a lot better off by the time we get to Friday and the weekend.
What is more dangerous to our health over the course of a couple days, 3 days? High humidity or low humidity? In other words, high humid heat or dry heat? What's more dangerous?
High humid heat's a lot more dangerous because the body does not have a good way to cool itself. When you have high humidity, the moisture does not evaporate off your skin as quickly. It just kind of sits there, and what that does is that sort of more moisture comes out of your body. Your body still thinks it's trying to cool. So what happens is you keep sweating and sweating and sweating, and eventually your sweating is the way your body cools itself, but eventually you get dehydrated. So you have to drink a lot of water. And compared to dry heat is what I call sneaky heat. In other words, you can still get dehydrated. You will get dehydrated. If it's 100 and it's very dry, you'll get dehydrated if you don't drink plenty of water, and you can get a real nasty sunburn. You don't really feel it, though. It kind of sneaks up on you. But I guess if there's any good news about high humidity heat, you know it's there. You know how you feel. You know what you need to do. The problem is people still ignore the warning signs, which you really don't want to see. Is somebody, you're out, you're getting hot, you're working outside or whatever, and you start sweating, and then you stop sweating, and then you get that red appearance on your skin. That's starting to go into heat exhaustion. And eventually, if you ignore that, you start getting into more serious things like heat stroke. So the biggest thing we want to tell people is especially for our workers that are outdoors, you want to take a lot of breaks. I know everybody always says that all the time, but this kind of heat, you want to take a lot of breaks because while the temperature is going to be in the upper 90s, it's going to feel like it's 115 or 110 late this afternoon. And again, tomorrow afternoon, it's going to feel the same way. So staying cool outdoors is the biggest thing. And it's dangerous if you're indoors, too. If you live in a house that doesn't have good circulation or doesn't have air conditioning, take advantage of the cooling centers. And we're really concerned about nighttime because sometimes elderly individuals, as a sense of security, they keep their windows closed, even when it's 100 degrees outside, and they don't have air conditioning, and they don't run a fan, or they forgot where the fan is or something like that. You want to definitely make sure that you want to check on the elderly, older family members that can't get around very easily. That's always a good idea because the key here is you got to be safe during the day and at night. And if it's not going below 80 at night, we just got to 100 during the day, the house is probably going to be somewhere in the 80s or 90 if we don't have air conditioning. So that's the key, too. A lot of the Chicago fatalities that happened during the 90s heat wave happened because individuals that were older left their windows closed and they didn't have any way to keep themselves cool. They didn't drink enough water, and we ended up discovering some pretty unfortunate situations. So we want to avoid that this time around. And then, of course, outdoors, it goes without saying, you got to stay hydrated. And yes, the humid, hot heat, that is the most dangerous heat compared to the dry heat.
Final question, Mark Thibodeau from the Weather Channel. Appreciate your time. This will sound like a loaded question, a political question. It's not meant to be. Is this just August in Chicago? Is this just August, or is this something unexpected in your mind?
No, this is just August in Chicago. We've had other heat waves that have occurred. We have had heat waves. Like I said, we've had heat waves just about every year. We have some kind of a heat wave. And this is typically what can happen in Chicago. You know, it's often been said in August in Chicago, it's going to do one or two things. It's going to flood or it's going to bake. There's usually no in between, especially these last 2 weeks of Chicago weather here in August. You know, if you look back over the past years, you know, we had the summer of '87, we had a huge flood that occurred during the middle of August. It just basically flooded all the runways at O'Hare. We had like something like 7 or 8 inches of rain in like one night. It was back, I think it was sometime back in the middle of August in the summer of '87. I'll never forget that. Because even as a younger person, I followed that, and it was incredible to watch. Basically, O'Hare became an island because of all the heavy rainfall. So if we're not getting that, typically we're getting zapped by a bunch of heat. And this time around, we're not so much getting the rain, we're getting a big heat wave. So it's basically the season's beginning to try to transition. It's like we're getting a last punch here before we start getting into hopefully some cooler weather as we get into September. As we look on the computer models, once we get beyond this heat wave, there are definite signs. I'm not going to say we're transitioning to fall, but we're going to cool off. There's going to be a front coming down in the wake of this heat wave, and it is going to push us back into the 70s for highs as we get into the weekend. So it's a short-lived one, and I think that's the best news of all. It's not going to be days and days of this kind of heat. In fact, the forecast high for Saturday is 75 degrees here in Chicago, with much lower humidity. So we get through today, get through tomorrow, and please check on friends, neighbors. Please stay hydrated, and if you need somewhere cooler to sleep at night, or if it's too hot in the house, go somewhere certainly and cool off, because even with water, when you're in a hot house, no circulation, that can be dangerous. And outside, it goes without saying, you got to take all precautions in this kind of heat.
Mark Thibodeau, thank you, sir. And just point of clarification, I do always have to say indices. I can never say indexes, correct?
You know, people say different things. I would say indices is usually the kind of the workhorse of the heat index reading, if you will. Yeah, heat indices. I would say, you know, sometimes I'll say heat index levels to 115. You can say that.
Okay.
But most people say heat indices of 110 plus or something like that.
Got it.
But yeah, that's what we're looking at. It's like right now, just looking at the latest weather, 97 degrees out there, and the dew point. That's another thing we look at too. That measures how much moisture is in the air. When that's in the 70s, that's really tropical, that's really humid. We have a dew point at O'Hare right now of 77. Our heat index right now at O'Hare is 113. So
Mark Thibodeau, thank you very much, sir. You're very generous with your time. We appreciate it. We'll listen for more here on Double DLS. Thanks to everybody at the Weather Channel.
Okay, thank you.
If you have a diselderly neighbor or a disabled neighbor, please assist that neighbor if possible.